Hi, everyone. It's Larry Kotlikoff back with Economics Matters, the podcast. I'm delighted to have Nancy Lloyd, one of America's premier personal finance journalists, uh, with an amazing background I want to tell you about, to talk to us about a variety of different consumer topics. So let me, Nancy, if you don't mind, can indulge me to describe your background. Uh, so as I said, she's a really truly trusted economics and technology journalist and a best-selling author. She's worked at the Federal Reserve Board, and she's worked on banking, domestic and international banking and credit issues, and written position papers for the governors of the board. She's done more than 75 monetary commentaries for NPR's Morning Edition. She has a very strong background in math and science. She started computer programming in 7th grade, get this. And then she quickly skipped to 11th grade and was admitted to Cornell University's engineering college at 17. And at Cornell, she became interested in economics, and after 3 semesters in engineering and 3 in economics, she got a degree, magna cum laude in economics, and then she She got an MA in economics from Princeton, and then she joined IBM as a professional systems engineer. So it goes from economics at Princeton, from economics at Cornell and engineering at Cornell, to economics at Princeton, getting a degree there, to working at IBM as a systems engineer. And she was quickly promoted there to a financial analyst and strategic planner. And her next stop was became a pricer for large special bids at IBM's manufacturing plant, or one of their manufacturing plants. So get this, now at 30, she comes back to Washington, becomes a master gardener, to the point where she was asked to give 7 lectures at the National Arboretum on environmental gardening. And then she really starts her career as a reporter and commentator. She's written cover story exposés for the New York Times, Sunday Business, Your Money section, the Washington Post, Good Housekeeping, Family Circle, and Parade. She's also written feature pieces for the LA Times, Reader's Digest, and National Wildlife. And she's been quoted by The Economist, Columbia Journalism Review, and other outlets. She has a best-selling book, her first best-selling book, I guess, Simple Money Solutions, published by Random House. Sure, it's available on Amazon. Everybody should go out and get it. Simple Money Solutions, and it gives advice about working in a strong or weak economy, and dealing with mortgages, mortgage traps, consumer debt, other risks that foreclosures, sinking house price, how to deal with the issues of house prices going up and down. We certainly have that issue today because we have very high house prices, job losses. And then she wrote 2 more books, or let's say next 2 books. Yeah, the next 2 books, I guess, that are planned are going to explore the convergence of money and technology and give advice to parents and teens. So, Nancy, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
That's great. So we wanted to kind of hit you up on your knowledge base with respect to consumer decisions, and I wanted to start with some of your kind of advice about credit cards. You've spent a lot of time around that particular
area.
Yeah. So want to really have your advice on that for everybody, because so many people are in trouble with credit cards. But take it away a little bit, okay?
Well, the economy swings from decade to decade on this. So the problem of being in too much debt seems to recur frequently as the interest rates go up, and people are really in bad shape. And I found even myself, when I was checking out with something the other day, I was trying to dispute a charge on my credit card bill, and it said it offered me the chance to flex pay it. And I have no interest in flex paying anything, especially something that I don't really owe money on. So that was kind of hard to even get out of that. And I also discovered that my credit card, and it's from a very big bank, when I went into CVS a few months ago, suddenly it decided it was going to pay for my packages with the points that I had left. I always get that 2% back thing because I like to have the flexibility of what I can do with the money instead of tying it up to an airplane corporation or whatever it is that they want to track your rewards to. I just like to have the cash. It gives you greater flexibility. But I've discovered more and more people are really not only in debt, but they keep getting offered all these flexible payment things, things that they don't even want, things they put in their cart, whether they're at Target or Walmart or whether they're at much more expensive stores, they're being offered these things. And I'm going to say one thing is, there's some power in having an item in your cart and deciding, A, I really don't want it right now, or B, I really don't need it right now, or C, in the worst case, I really don't have the money to pay for it, so I'm going to have to leave and try to hope that the cashier doesn't judge me too harshly because I'm not going to pay for it today.
So this is going shopping, let's say at a Target or something, and you come up to the counter and something happens unexpected? Is that what you're saying?
Well, sometimes you put stuff in your cart, you look at it and you think, wow, I didn't even know this was available right now, or the price isn't bad, or the color looks really good, and I might need it in 4 weeks. I may not, but I might. And there's this impulse thing, and it's almost like we're having our own reality show playing in our own heads saying, I better get it now, I better get it now, or I'm going to lose it to somebody else. And honestly, there is a power of being able to say, you know what? I honestly don't know if I even want it. If I get it, it was fun finding it. It was fun putting it in the cart. As I think Garfield once said, as the cat, where there's more fun in the getting than the having. And I think people really need to start understanding that that's an issue. If they don't buy things that they really don't want and they end up sitting in the back of their closet for the next 10 years, they're going to have a lot more cash to spend on things that maybe it'll be an impulse purchase, but it might be something that they will actually use.
So on this score, economists have, I think Raj Chetty, who's at Harvard, has an economist there who's studied whether if the sales tax is posted at the grocery store or not, it matters to people's decisions. They may buy something and then they show up at the counter and they have to pay sales tax, and they hadn't kind of fully incorporated that in their thinking about whether they could afford it. And now they're embarrassed to say, I can't, forget that. But you're saying, you're full of practical advice. And so the first piece of practical advice today is don't feel embarrassed.
Embarrassment is better than saying later on, I shouldn't have spent the money. I don't know what to do with it. I can't return it. You could be at one of those places that you're on a bad list because you returned 3 things over the life of your shopping. And they now say, you can't return anything anymore. And that, if you're even me, who doesn't have to live by much of a budget these days.
Let me turn to another issue, which is hidden fees for paying down your credit cards early.
Well, there are a lot of fees that people are used to. There are the fees for late fees if you don't pay it on time. There are fees if you don't pay the minimum. There's a bunch of other fees, but the one that surprises most people is not one that's typically listed there. It's a fee for paying the card too early. And what it actually is that I know a lot of people over the years have said that they've been trying to pay their credit card bills off in full, or at least pay them way down. And since they're being charged interest for every day that that money is outstanding, they decide that they make their monthly payment. And then if they have, say, $100 left or whatever, they make a second payment that month. And then they decide, well, I don't owe a payment the next month. Well, the credit card companies don't view it that way. They view it if you paid 2 payments in the prior month, but you still owe a minimum monthly payment, what's still listed on your bill for that month that you're now into, which is now the second month, which means you're literally forced at that point to make 3 payments in that 2-month period.
I see. So one has to be quite careful. What about credit card interest rates and shopping around trying to pay off one card by borrowing maybe on another card? Is that a technique that's worth pursuing?
Well, people do it, and it's not as easy. It's not as much fun, and there are a lot more gotchas than there sort of used to be on that one. it's not so much that you borrow it from an existing card. It's one that with a card that you don't currently have. They do it just to lure you over with a free few months. Sometimes there are fees attached to it. Sometimes they hope that once you move the stuff over, you're going to sort of forget that your goal there was to pay it off before the interest even started accruing on this low or no interest fee new card that you took out. So you really have to be super vigilant if you're going to do it. And the one thing I would definitely say avoid is any kind of, say, taking out a home equity line or something that's attached to your house. Because a lot of people do it because, at least in the old days, it was cheaper than the credit card interest rate that you paid, which it still is. But what they discovered is after about a year or so, most of those people that paid off any part of their credit card bills using the money from the home equity line, they typically ended up adding that as additional balance that they owed. So they didn't not only pay down the amount, they actually ended up with a total of more debt because they have the home equity debt and they still keep buying on their credit card. So that doesn't really work out very well beyond theory.
Now, another thing you are onto is the use of by relatives of your credit card. If you give a relative, for example, your credit card, tell us what the issue is.
The issue here is that a lot of, especially kids, discovered when they first started to take a credit card out in college or whenever they got the first one, they discovered that they had a relative. Sometimes it was a mother, sometimes it was a father, sometimes they were very close to them. In some cases, they never saw them after they were born, but they were using their identity. And so their credit was already ruined by the time they went to get the first credit card. Sometimes they had the credit card, and yet you had a relative that decided, well, I'm mad at you, or I need the money, or I need a vacation and I can't afford it. So I'm just going to use your card. Now, the interesting thing about it is some people, especially like, let's say a mother, I've heard many that I've interviewed for stories say, I would never report them. I would never say anything. I know they did this to my credit and I forgive them. They couldn't do any better. But when somebody's doing it more vindictively and they have the ability to pay it off, but they're just trying to see if you're that easy to get along with, that you'll actually pay their credit card bill. If you try to get the credit card company to remove it, especially if you try to get them to prosecute it, because oftentimes these people will charge things to your card more than once because the banks do not like to sue it if it's a relative. They claim that more than 95% of the people never show up in court. So they've ended up suing your relative for you. You don't show up, they're stuck with the cost, and they're also stuck with more bad publicity that they don't like, that their card was being allowed to be used by somebody who did not authorize to use it. So it's a sticky trap. You don't even have to give them the number these days. They can buy them.
Let's talk about retirement for a minute. It's something Americans think about regularly. Ask yourself, how financially secure do you really feel? Do you have enough money to retire? How much is really enough? And if you don't have enough money, how can you possibly find that extra money before you do retire? These are all tough questions. My retirement software, Maxify Planner, is the powerful online planning tool that takes the guesswork out of retirement. It weighs your assets against your fixed expenses to calculate how much you can safely spend every year for the rest of your life based on when you decide to retire. And it shows you safe ways to find more money. Maxify makes a complicated problem like retirement planning simple. It's accurate, easy to use, and produces what you really seek, peace of mind. So make the smart choice and visit Maxify.com today. Don't miss this opportunity. That's Maxify with an I, M-A-X-I-F-I, Maxify.com. Now let's get back to the podcast. Well, let's break this down into pieces. So let's say my kid isn't happy with me, or my kid might be, or Joe's kid, not my kid. My kids are too old for this. Joe's kid has a son, Sam, and Sam might be have gotten into trouble, needs to pay off somebody who's threatening him, or maybe he's addicted to something, and he steals Joe's credit card. So Sam has now stolen Joe's credit card, starts billing a lot of things. It takes Joe a month to find out that Sam's done this. And Sam goes and says or tries to say deny the purchases, right? And
Mhm.
you're saying that the bank will not reimburse because Sam is a relative of Joe.
They may reimburse it, but the problem is in a lot of cases, the person that is using a relative's card or card number without even having the card fraudulently often does it as a recurring thing. And they basically know that the banks do not like to sue relatives of the cardholder, which means they're getting a free pass. There are certain people, they've got addictions, they've got illnesses, they've got other reasons why they want the money, or at least they think that they're entitled to the money. And you literally lose that one threat that they're going to get sued. They might end up in prison. They might end up having to at least pay for it. The rules are just different with relatives. So I want to just caution people, because most people assume that it's a fair and just world. And if a stranger steals your money, you ought to be able to get it back. And if you go to court, if they ask you to, that the bank will take care of things. We think that it'll be the same thing with relatives, but it's not often the way it's handled.
So I would just say for parents, the general message is hold on to your wallet. Don't let your kid, don't leave your wallet sitting around so that somebody can grab the numbers, even if it's we don't know everything that our kids are up to. Let's be
That's
honest.
right.
And we don't know, if they borrowed your card and then one of their friends sees the number, they could be using it.
Well, in that case, I would definitely stop the card and I would have a talk with the bank. I would ask for a new card to be issued, and I would definitely try to keep them from seeing it. It's just the cards are in so many places these days. They get copied, things get sent places. Accounts can be so unfortunately easily hacked
Right.
that it's not even a question of you've exposed it to somebody. They can get it a variety of ways that you and I never thought would be possible.
So, Nancy, are you up on the latest numbers about how much typical credit card debt is? I mean, I know that it's the largest consumer debt, and right after that is student loans. But do you know what a typical?
I
Uh,
don't at the moment. I'm sorry. I should
really?
have looked it
Okay,
up.
my sense is that it could be 20. Some people have like 20K out there, and in
Easily.
obligations easily. So
Hmm.
there's going to be a distribution, and then these interest rates that the credit cards are charging historically have been astronomical in the
Hmm.
18% range, right? And nobody in the government is saying that's, hey, this is, if it gets high enough, nobody can, this is happening primarily among low-income people. If the credit card interest rate is high enough, nobody will ever be able to pay it off. Just like
Well,
this.
there's two views of the world on this one. Number one, not carrying extra balances, not even carrying a balance from month to month is really good for the individual. For the economy, we need to have people buying things. Now, at the moment, there's inflation that we're concerned about, and then there's the jobs numbers. But inflation right now is still an issue. So we don't want to discourage everybody from spending, but you have to take a personal responsibility and say, do I really want to have this? It kind of reminds me of that model who said that nothing that she ever tasted as good as being skinny felt. And sort of, I feel that way about credit card debt. There is nothing I have ever bought that made me feel good enough that I wanted to carry a balance from month to month.
So if you're younger than 35, the median credit card debt is like $1,900, and then 35 to 44, it's 2,600. So of course, not all these things may be paid off, but uh, we have some people. I mean, that's just the median. That's half people are above that amount, so that we uh, the average unpaid balances, let's see, the national average credit card debt among cardholders with unpaid balances in the fourth quarter of last year was $7,000, 6864. And that's huge. So if you're paying 20% interest on that, we're talking about basically $1,200 a year that is going down the tubes.
It is.
Yeah,
And the cost of a lot of other things, whether it's groceries, whether it's car loans, car leases, whatever it is that they've got, their recurring costs, it's food, and it's a variety of other things. But one of the things that I have learned based on not only how I learned how to manage money, but even working with high school kids and college kids and recent graduates. I had done this big expose in 1999 that showed all the problems that college kids at that time were getting into with their first credit card. They were being offered these credit limits that were just astronomical compared to basically most of them were earning nothing or just a little above nothing. Through a long set of circumstances over the next few years, we did manage to get them to change the rules a little bit. They either have to be able to support the credit limit with whatever income they've currently got coming in, or they now must have a co-signer, which even a lot of the parents are applauding, because the parents often never knew that their child even had gotten a credit card, whether they were in college. Sometimes they were in high school and they had gotten a part-time job and they were required to get some kind of a store card so that they could be paid or that they could get the discounts that they were entitled to as an employee. So at least that rule changed, and that's the good side. The bad side is that a lot more of them are now putting everything on a debit card, which in theory sounds great because you pay it off every month. It comes right out of your bank account. Unfortunately, if you've ever read Regulation E, which I did have the fortune of reading when I first got to the Federal Reserve Board, it controls all electronic funds transfers. And I ask people this, I ask people this several times a week, different people that I run into. And I ask them to keep your loss down to $50 if somebody fraudulently used your credit card. How many days do you have to do it? And nobody gets this right, so I'm going to just spot you at 60 days. Now, how many days do you have with a debit card or an ATM card if money was taken fraudulently out of your bank account using that card to keep your loss down to $50 for that one time? You want to take a guess?
30 days?
2 business days. Wait 3 to 60 days, and it goes up to $500 each time somebody fraudulently used your card's number. They don't even have to have your card. And you wait beyond 60 days, you can be out not only your entire bank balance, but everything that's tied to that bank account. For instance, say you do have a home equity line of credit, say you have other lines of credit, say you have other accounts that are attached to that one account that's got the debit card on it. You can be out the entire thing and the government isn't going to do you any good. Plus, even if they do replace it, in the case of a debit card or an ATM card, if they replace the money that was stolen, you can still be hit with a number of fees, for instance, for falling below your minimum balance that you're required to have. And you can have some other fees that you didn't expect to have along the way. So it's an option and it's become very popular, but boy, I have never had a debit card or an ATM card. And I will say, I feel that I'm leading a full and complete life without it.
So this is really scary to me, because it's saying that somebody with a debit card really needs to be looking at their their checking account balance pretty much every day to make sure, because you're saying that if you wait, let's say you just looked once a month, or maybe you thought nobody's reported, you haven't heard anything from the bank about suspicious activity, and now you look at your bank balance, you can see all these charges. Maybe it's 6 weeks later, after all this stuff has been purloined, and you're saying you'll get nothing back potentially.
Well, in the past, there have been occasional times. In fact, Donald Trump did an ad once for a big bank, I believe in New York. This is more than 20 years ago, where he went dumpster diving because he allegedly lost, this is for this advertisement, he allegedly lost his debit card, and he went diving into the dumpster to try to find it. And there was a voiceover, as I recall, that said something like, "You don't have to worry about it because we have decided that we're going to match it with the same protection that you would get with a credit card." Sounds good, right? In reality, however, not so great. First of all, their promise has no force in law, and they can change it at any time, which I believe they did, and they don't offer that kind of payment back anymore. You got to realize that there's a huge difference in terms of consumer protection that you get with a credit card versus a debit card or ATM card, and that's just one of the facts of life.
So you're telling me that Donald Trump was on some kind of an ad where he's diving into a dumpster? crawling into,
Google it. Google it. You can still play it.
well, so the
It's just
Democrats,
everything you expected it to be. I do believe there was a body double, but
well,
I
okay.
guess
Yeah. So let's talk about college. You kind of mentioned this in passing here about college students taking out credit cards. Uh, but you also have uh, examined and discussed ways to get through college without going into debt. I mean, uh, I'm a big fan of zero debt, and I mean the idea of having massive amount of paying 20% interest on credit card debt, it just like gives me the chills as an economist. But then if you look at college loans, student loans, they send these letters that they call award letters. And the award, it's one thing to call a grant, a tuition scholarship, an award, that's an award. But when you say that, hey, here's your award letter, and by the way, includes, here's the scholarship, but that's likely to be kind of smallish. But also here's your other part of your award, which is you can borrow this much amount. We're going to lend you this much amount at this interest rate via the federal student loan. The fact that, when I believe it's still called your award letter, and that it includes the information about the loan that you can take out at what's going to be a super high rate, generally speaking. And if that rate, if let's say the student loan rate today is 7%, I don't know exactly what the current rate is, and inflation is based on the last monthly data, it's running around 3.5%. So that's a 3.5% real rate. That's pretty high for the real rate. But what if inflation goes down back to where it was, which is close to 1%, and you're paying 7%? That's 6% real. That's enormously high, and that's compounding, of course, through college. Before you start to pay it off, they're just going to keep adding up interest on it, and now you leave college with a bigger bill, and then you may take 15 years to pay it off on a standardized basis, or
if you're lucky.
do an income-related repayment. I talk a lot about this in my book, Money Magic, and you probably, may in your books as well. But this is super high, and you can't discharge this debt through bankruptcy. You can't refinance this at a lower rate of all the, if inflation goes down to 1% or so, all the interest rates are going to come down on loans, treasury bill rates and treasury bond rates, everything, the whole structure is going to come down, but your student loan rate's not going to move until you get it off. And you can try and maybe borrow privately, but use that to pay it off. But that too can be tricky because the private lenders are generally more expensive than the government. But anyway, tell us if you're trying to advise a young person who's thinking about going to college and has no sense of interest rates, never took a course in home economics or personal finance in high school, or economics in general, and I never heard of what discounting is, compound interest, knows nothing like this. And the parents are just delighted the kid is going to go to Amherst, just got in, but their view is, hey, this is on you, but we're so happy, and we just told all our friends and relatives that you're going to Amherst. What would you tell that kid?
I think they should go to their parent and say, bragging rights are going to cost you a little bit on that one. So I expect $1,000 every time you brag about where I got in, unless you're going to help me pay it. That doesn't always go over too well. In fact, that probably won't do very much for other than getting a laugh. But I think we really need to rethink a lot of stuff. I think that you got to ask yourself, is the major I'm planning to go into going to actually help me pay down this amount, or am I just going to be done with it and think I'll end up with the job I got and I didn't even need at least 2 of the 4 years of college I took to get it, but I'm still on the hook for the 4 years of the tuition that I borrowed. And there are some other things too, which is even I ended up creating a work study program for myself. It wasn't out of necessity, but it was sort of my family moved, for instance, to Washington when I was finished with my fifth semester of college at Cornell. And I ended up taking a semester off and I got a job at a government think tank. But once again, it was my computer skills that allowed me to get this job because
Mhm.
technically you needed a bachelor's degree and they made an exception for me because my coding skills were quite good. And so I managed to do that. I was hoping to get some college credit, which didn't work out, but I got some really valuable work experience, and they also paid for me to take two statistics courses at Georgetown University over my lunch period. And I was lucky, I was near DC, but on the Virginia side where I was working, there was somebody in my class that was actually driving by there every single day. And he would pick me up. We would spend our 2 hours in class, and he would drop me back off at the end of the lunch hour. I didn't get lunch, but I got 6 hours paid for by my think tank that I was working for. So that's one thing. And there are a lot of other things that people really could do, even if they wanted to deliberately take a semester off. And even if they wanted to attend community college then, because a lot of times kids who don't have money will be encouraged to start at a community college nearby, and then they're often promised that they're going to be able to take those credits and move them with them to whatever college they ultimately get into where they really want to be happy and graduate from. But so many of them spend the time, spend the money, go to these courses, which may or may not be good depending on the college that they chose. But they often find after the fact that they can't transfer the credits. And even if they get accepted to the better college, they have to basically take the same courses over again. And it's an expensive thing. And it's frustrating because once you've taken a course, for the most part, you don't really want to take the same course again. So it's one of those things. There are a few community colleges around the country, though, now that will actually have arrangements with better four-year schools. And they have a thing where they are almost guaranteed that the credit hours will be accepted at the new college. And they're accepted more graciously than I think a lot of community college students are at some four-year schools. So that's one thing. But I also want to say, if you do get a job, if you can do something that's relative and relevant to the job that you've got, oftentimes, especially now, since there's a shortage of young employees in certain careers, they will be willing to pay for you to take a course or two. And it certainly never hurts to ask. Even if they only pay half of the amount, you're still getting the credits and you're getting them for a fraction of what you would have paid if you did it on your own. And remember that when you take it by the credit hour, it's a fraction of what you would pay if you took, say, 4 courses during a course of semester and paid for a full semester of tuition. The prices just are better if you pay for it by the hour.
Want more money, less risk, and a better life? Buy Money Magic, a new book by Lawrence Kotlikoff, Boston University economist, personal finance expert, and best-selling author. Whether it's education, career, marriage, housing, investing, retirement, Social Security, IRA, or 401k decisions, Money Magic delivers scores of secrets to raise your living standard. Financial journalist Jane Bryant Quinn says Money Magic is a must-read. Nobel laureate George Akerlof says Money Magic is quite probably the best financial advice book ever written. Financial guru John Malden says, you'll love this amazing book. It's full of wit, wisdom, and startling paths to a better financial life. And columnist Scott Burns calls Money Magic a funny, brilliant read, offering wildly powerful, unconventional choices that can literally change your life. Get Lawrence Kotlikoff's Money Magic today at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and independent booksellers.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing to bear in mind is that 40% of the kids who start college don't actually finish college. They don't actually end up with a BA or BS or an AB.
Mhm.
It is so, and then you have a lot of people borrowing for the privilege of paying back the government and never having actually completed their degree. And then this other very interesting thing I think you're pointing out, which is that a lot of kids who go to, go to college to study X, end up with a job that has nothing to do with X. I have somebody who was on the podcast just recently, and she's a restaurateur. Just want to recall her first name, Sophie. Let me just make sure I don't screw up Sophie's last name. Hang on just one second. I will tell you. Cranin, yeah. It's unusual, C-R-A-N-I-N. Now, Sophie is like a top restaurateur in Boston, and she studied linguistics, I think at Cornell too. I think she went to Cornell. It's all on the podcast. My brother's the provost at Cornell, so there's a lot of, every time Cornell comes up.
I didn't know that.
And Cornell, by the way, is the kind of the only Ivy League school that takes in a lot of transfer students compared to other Ivy League schools. I think some of these.
Is it because they have so many state colleges there? I mean,
it could be, yeah.
Where most of them are going.
Yeah, that's the best route to get an Ivy degree for people that aren't accepted immediately might be through Cornell. So I'm going to put a little ad in for my brother here, but my twin brother, he's 5 minutes older. But anyway, so Sophie got this degree in linguistics. Then she worked the summer at Cape Cod, and she worked in, she decided she wanted to get into the restaurant business for some reason. And she was working in the Cape. Well, she applied and they said, well, you don't have any experience. So she goes to Cape Cod for the summer and works in a retail store, clothing store during the day, and at night works during the summer at 2 different restaurants, gets experience, ends up also got interested in HR, ends up basically, working for a very prominent restaurateur in Boston in HR, and then moves over into kind of more restaurant management. Now is working with the owner of something called Eastern Standard, which is a famous restaurant in Boston. They opened up a new one next to Fenway Park. So she has this whole career now, which is going to be a lifetime career as a restaurateur. And when you listen to her talk about restaurant business, she knows everything from beginning to end, soup to nuts, and nothing to do with linguistics, right? So did you need to go?
She's speaking and she's writing menus and she's writing other notes. So let's not completely rule out linguistics as part of your life.
Yeah, no, that's true. I think general education, I'm an educator, professor. So I think having some quality education is very important, and it's going to carry through to whatever you do, general education. But would it be worth it for her to have borrowed, her and her parents? Right now, there's a limit on how much the students can take out as student debt over their 4 years, but then the parent loans, which can be, which are at much even higher interest rates, at least 100 basis points or more, and there's no limit. So the parent could be taking out the loan to, let's say you get this award package. You say, well, you can borrow, let's say 45K grand, but BU's tuition and room and board, for example, I think is probably, if not, let me not speak for BU because I don't know the exact numbers, but there are colleges and premier places where it's 100K a year, basically, especially if it's an expensive city where everything costs so much. So we're talking like $400,000. So you're borrowing maybe 45, 50,000 according to this from the federal government, and the rest $350,000 your parents are potentially borrowing on your basis, and you're 18, and the parents are saying, well, we'll just borrow this, and then when you graduate, we'll present you with the statement, Nancy, guess what we've done on your behalf? We wanted you to go to this college, and so we don't want to worry you about the need to repay this loan, but we borrowed this money on your behalf, so you'll have to make the payments. Here they are, they're high. So we know that you majored in art history, but sorry, you can't afford to take an art history job because these payments that you have to pay they're yours. We did it on your behalf. We just don't want to bother telling you, but we don't want to scare you or worry you. But art history, that's not where you can work. This, I'm sure, is happening in a lot of families
Well,
where,
it does happen, but I remember even going into engineering, and one of the first things I heard was, don't go into aerospace engineering. That thing is on like this 20-year ups and down thing, and you may end up graduating at just the time when you can't get a job. So I listened to that and I thought, they're very good. I won't go into aerospace engineering. I don't know that I was going to do it anyhow, but I listened to what people in the business or people who are studying the industry had to say even before I chose my majors. Is it considered responsible parenting for parents to take out a loan that's that big and then give all the balance of the loan payments to the child without saying, hey, are you sure this is really the major that you want for the rest of your life? Have you ever taken a job in the summer with it or anything that would give you a clue as to whether or not A, you want it, B, you're good at it, and C, it's something that you think you can earn a living, a reasonable living going into that field. I mean,
yeah.
what are your thoughts on that? Because it seems
Well,
like a big decision for parents to have made.
Yeah, I mean, the parents, kind of, it's like each party could be free riding on the other. And the kids are depending on the parents are depending on the kid. And they're in this together. They need to have a discussion, frank discussion. Can we jointly afford this? Or can you afford this? We can, and especially if you go to college, what are you thinking about majoring in? And then even if they start the first year and they decide art history is the way to go, then maybe it's time to leave that college and go to a less expensive place.
Maybe, but also at least you have to say the child, if they're going to be stuck with the payments on the loan, they have to have a say in terms of what career they go into at that point. But yeah, one of the things I talked about, as we were discussing earlier, is that even if they don't spend an entire summer or a semester off in the field that they think they want to go into, and if they can do a little just part-time work even in the summer, say when they're in high school, to at least meet some people, see how they spend their day, see if this is something that they can even tolerate, let alone say, this is where my calling is.
Yeah, trying different things, making contacts, in this podcast, we've had so many cases of people that are so prominent in in different areas. And they all say, I had some break with some contact, this person connected me with this. By accident, I got into this occupation at a low level, but then that led me to the next step. So contacts matter. By the way, Sophie Cranion's job in the, when she kind of first broke into the industry was with Barbara Lynch, and she's a very famous Bostonian restaurateur. She's had many, many restaurants that she set up. But Sophie got into this via the kind of backdoor. She was interested in restaurant business, but she worked for Barbara first in HR and then got to know Barbara and then became kind of her right-hand person to assist, and now is working with somebody else who started his career with Barbara. So anyway.
So I thought you were going to loop this whole story back to Cornell and say that she ended up in a hotel school and lived happily ever after.
Well, that's the interesting thing. She didn't go to the hotel school. I mean, she didn't get it. She could have gone to done the BA in linguistics and then decided the way to get into the restaurant business was to go to the hotel school at Cornell or to
even I took hotel classes while I was there.
Right.
I took 3 of them while I was
That's like another
engineering and economics.
That's another couple $100,000 or so, depending on the program. And then it may never lead you to meet Barbara Lynch. Okay. She met Barbara Lynch through the back door. So that it's just, we need to keep our antenna out for all kinds of options here that
just don't pounce on the person you want as your mentor. They are typically run in fear when they see that happening. But I think it's always good to talk to people.
Right, show competence in whatever you're doing for whatever person, and not say day one, I want to be you, because that's the person, then they're likely to say day two, find another job, because they don't want to have somebody be them. They want somebody to do the job that they hired them for. And then they want to see that you can do other things as well.
Well, I can't speak for her, but I mean, one of the things that I was always shocked by, especially when I started working originally when I was still in college, but I had technically full-time jobs at these places, was full-time work was nothing like I thought it was. I didn't realize, for instance, how much I had to plan out my day in terms of how I was spending my time, the order in which I was doing the work, because I was always working for more than one person at a time, sort of on an equal level, and I had to decide whose work comes first and all. And I can honestly say, especially after interviewing applicants at a couple of places that I've graduated from recently, um, time management is not something they're learning in high school.
I'd like to talk to you about a really powerful financial planning tool to help you make smart retirement and other critical financial decisions. It's a tool that factors in all your financial data and shows you what you can sustainably spend every year for the rest of your life. That tool is my software company's Maxify Planner. It's incredibly powerful, it's accurate, and it's easy to use. Maxify takes the guesswork out of financial decisions at every stage of life. Its focus is on raising, de-risking, and sustaining your living standard. Maxify lets you run what-if scenarios to see how your finances will change in taking new jobs, buying a home, doing Roth conversions, retiring early, downsizing, investing more in the market, you name it. Knowing the impact of these decisions before you make them is the secret to making smarter decisions. And it's also the secret to what we all seek, which is financial peace of mind. So please visit Maxify.com today to start planning. That's Maxify with an I, Maxify.com, Maxify.com. Now let's get back to the podcast. Any kind of general advice that we haven't kind of covered in the consumer area?
One of the things that to go back to the housing thing, for instance, I mean, there are several things that people haven't considered, at least for a number of years, at least since before the pandemic. I remember buying my first house when I was working in White Plains for IBM when I got moved to the division headquarters. And I bought a house that was 9 miles away. It was a nice house, and there was a highway that went right from basically my driveway up until IBM. And I couldn't get over the first day I went from home to work, and it was bumper to bumper traffic. And this was like 7:30 in the morning before everybody was going to work at 6 in the morning. And every day I started going earlier and earlier till I finally got there just after 6 in the morning and could get a beautiful parking place. But I was ending up getting to work an hour and a half before I needed to, or more than an hour and a half before I needed to. One of the things is test the drive at the time that you're actually going to be taking it. Because during the pandemic, people were buying things sight unseen and everything. They're sort of not used to this idea. Another thing is I've seen a lot of parents out of goodwill and thinking they're doing the best thing that they can for their child. In some cases, they've had a problem. In one case, this person's wife even had just passed away really suddenly at a very young age. And the parents bought these kids condos. And they said, oh, this is going to be the greatest investment. It's going to be incredible. It's in the town that they've got the job in now, and everything's going to be great. And I asked them, well, what happens if the job goes away or they get a promotion and they want to go somewhere and they can't sell the condo? And they all just say, oh, you're such a buzzkill. You always see the downside to everything. Well, I'm going to say 3 out of the 4 of the ones that told me this in the last couple of years are all faced with unsellable and empty condos that they bought for their kids. And they're really not sure what to do with it. Can't even really rent it because you can't maintain it at a long distance if you own it, but you're not actually there to be doing the maintenance. And if you hire somebody just for one unit, you're going to be losing a lot more money doing that. So there's good intentions, but I think a lot of people sort of need to think through what the long-term meaning and implications of some of their decisions are. And the other thing is just with the interest rates and the kind of mortgage they get, we're so accustomed these days to adjustable rate mortgages and assuming that they're going to set in 5 years and everything will be great. I remember at one point living in Florida, actually, when the rates were extraordinarily high. And they had this thing that started that were called negative amortization loans, which basically you have an adjustable rate and it doesn't is set until about 5 years typically. But then it turns out if the rate is now higher than what you initially started as, they actually add it to the back end of your mortgage saying that you've been underpaying the interest rate all of these years. So you actually end up owing more than you borrowed at the end of the time than when they set the mortgage. And people are not used to this. They're not really used to what this could mean to them financially. It could force a few people to actually sell the house or at least rent it out because they can't afford it. And in some cases, it's even worse because if they can't afford it, a lot of other people can't afford it either. And there's just some other things, like there's another one that's an interest-only mortgage. And you can often get these even from a bank or something. And it basically says over the next 30 years, we'll keep your payment low, but all you're paying is the interest. And you still owe the same amount that you borrowed whenever you finally sell the house. And that's a shock for people. And they may have disclosed it, but these terms just don't mean things to most home buyers.
So that's a case of, in effect, you find out that you've been renting, not owning this whole time. And another example would be in reverse mortgages, where they give you some money up front based on your house. And then they say, well, if you continue to live in your house, you don't have to pay it back. But meanwhile, what they borrowed, what they gave you, plus all the fees, they have up to 15, 20 fees, different kinds. And this is all government approved. There's a government plan here. It's called the HECM loan.
It's not Nancy approved. I can't speak for the government.
Yeah, it's not Larry approved either. It's just, the more I see the government involved in the financial area, the more I smell Wall Street, bribing Congress to make this somehow legit. So they give you money, and then they tack on the fees, which are significant, and then all of it accrues at a very high interest rate. And no problem if you live to your maximum age, if you stay in your house the whole time and then pass away and you have no kids. But if you stay in your house till the end and you do die, when you do die, the bank, the reverse mortgage lender is going to grab all that interest plus the principal, everything you borrow, plus fees, plus the interest. And if your house value is less than that amount, they're going to take your house entirely and your kids will get nothing. So there's that. But then also, maybe after 10 years, you need to go in a nursing home, or you need to move to, your kids need you to live with them to take care of the grandchildren. So now at that point, all the stuff borrowed plus all the extra very high interest that's been accumulating with compounding interest becomes due. And that can be a huge bill. So my rule of thumb is that anything that's complicated, any financial arrangement, life insurance arrangement, annuity contract, whatever home healthcare, long-term healthcare insurance, anything that's not plain vanilla, you should stay away from, because
I agree with that.
The financial industry is here to hurt you, not help you. So,
what advice do you have? Where should people be putting their money then?
Well, one of my favorite investments right now is inflation index bonds at 30. The whole term structure is around 2.4%, 2.3% real. And so you can buy a 30-year tip right now that's going to yield 2.4% above inflation. And you'll get a coupon payment that is adjusted every year for inflation, and the principal gets adjusted so that any cumulative inflation is reflected in the final payoff. And if you just hold it till maturity, you will get 2.4%. Now, if you go back just like 5 years ago, the return on tips was negative by 0.5%. So the real yield on tips right now is basically at a 20-year high. And that's a way for older people in retirement to secure a floor to their living standard. And
Okay, but you can't buy more than, what is it, 10,000 a year?
no, that's I bonds, but tips you can
Oh,
buy as
sorry.
much as you want. Yeah, I bonds have some special properties, but they're not long-term. They're more, the interest rate is being adjusted, being set by the Treasury exogenously, not based on the market. Treasury just announces every 6 months, here's the interest rate for the next 6 months, which is, and it also has some extra positive features uh, compared to tips. But if you really want to, invest a good chunk of your retirement assets in tips, I'm not a financial advisor. I don't give financial advice, but
I'm not either, and I don't either. Although I did discover several people were reading my book in preparation. This shocked me, of their certified financial planning license, which I assured them that was not what the book was written for.
I think most middle class and upper middle class people should, if they got Social Security, they should be thinking about, once they retire, what we call, in my software company, we have a tool called Maxify, MAXIFI.com. It's a software tool, Maxify Planner. And it has this report where you can say, hey, I want to put so much in the market, stock market, but I'm not going to touch it or even think it's going to be anything there for this number of years. I'm just going to gradually withdraw it based on what's there. And then otherwise I'll be investing in tips or something safe. And that gives you a floor to your living standard because you're not spending out of anything risky. And then when you do withdraw, when we do Monte Carlo simulations, whatever you withdraw, you put into tips at that point. So you're always spending out of safe money. That's a simple rule for being diversified between something safe and something risky, but not depending on the risky, the stock market. There's no what's called sequence of return risk where your living standard could be reduced because you sold from the stock market just when it dropped, and then you buy again when it goes back up. You buy, sell low and buy high, the reverse of what you want to do. But since you're not doing anything with those stocks except holding them until you start gradually withdrawing or immediately withdrawing at some date and not spending out them, treating them as lost until they're found, that's your living standard for. And that's, I think, kind of the holy grail to financial planning for the middle class and upper middle class, which is not having to sleep at night, worry at night that the stock market's going to permanently crash. We have a lot of people say that over 30-year holding periods, the stock market has never done poorly. But what they're doing is using.
They have no idea what could actually happen. I know. I've always been shocked by that.
And also the statistic is not a real statistic because every 30, we only have like 3 independent 30-year holding periods going back from 1925 till the present. Otherwise, we have overlapping years of data. And so you can't. So I know of 4 observations. I know 3 holding periods in the US where you did fine, starting with 25 out 30 years and then 30 years. But then if you look at the Japanese stock market, when it peaked and started to fall, 30 years later was below where it had started from. It hadn't recovered after 30 years. So the market is quite risky, but it's got a great average return. So I do think people shouldn't give up on the stock market just because they're retired, but they shouldn't.
No, I wasn't saying that, but it's just history does not say how it's going to go from then on. And I remember even when my book came out, there were all these people. I had these chats that ABC News had for me and other places, and they were very well attended. And every single one of them said, well, I'm guaranteed, this really high percentage return on the stock market. Why do I want to even pay it on my credit card? I mean, my credit card's my credit card, but I'm guaranteed this in the stock market. And I kept saying, wait a second, where is it saying that you're guaranteed this? And you sort of have to give them basic investing math. And I still think it's a shame, even with all the financial literacy classes that are being taught now, and all these different schools and
Yeah,
all
no,
the
it's just
information that they're
basic,
getting.
yeah,
They're not getting stuff they really need.
which is, basically warnings. And, I think we're gonna have to bring this to a close because we spent about an hour, but, one of the things that you can see in the market is that if you try and buy protection against the stock market value in the future being lower than had you invested in inflation index bonds, it turns out that the longer the date from which, if you want to say, well, look, I want to buy something that's going to protect me from the market being below what I would have otherwise gotten in tips out 10 years, out 11 years, out 12 years, out 13, 12, 13 years. The further out you go, the more expensive the option. So if stocks were actually safer relative to inflation index bonds, the longer you held them, if stocks were safe in the long run. That's what people in Wall Street are constantly telling their investors or clients, which is completely not true in terms of this simple, go try and buy that protection on the market and see whether it's cheaper to get that insurance. The further out you go, it's more expensive because stocks is a random walk. It should be this way that the trend is positive and it's much more likely than not that it's going to be up there. But there's also more time for your initial investment to go down the tubes to zero. So that's why the thing
That's a cheery way to end this.
Yeah. Well, I think we did help the
Yeah, I
listeners,
think we did.
give them a dose of whatever caution. And I want to thank you so much, Nancy. You had a fantastic career that's ongoing, and keep at it because
Thank you for having me. It's been very nice talking with you.
thanks again. I'm gonna now.
Thank you.